She showed up unannounced to the billionaire CEO's family dinner with the child he tried to keep secret. Let me take you into a moment that froze an entire room. The chandeliers glowed like liquid gold. The guests, CEOs, politicians, influencers, murmured over crystal glasses. Every eye in the Renshaw estate radiated wealth, legacy, and the polished perfection that only money can buy. And at the center of it all stood Kyle Renshaw, the billionaire prodigy, America's golden boy. Camera-ready smile, immaculate charcoal suit, perfect posture, perfect life, until the doors opened. The music didn't stop, but the room did. A woman stepped inside. Soft dress, simple heels, hair gently falling in waves. She didn't dress to impress. She didn't need to. She carried a presence that made the air shift, and beside her, a small boy, wide-eyed, curious. Holding her hand, his gaze landed on Kyle, and Kyle froze. His mother whispered, barely audible, "Whose child is that?" Kyle didn't breathe, couldn't breathe, because that boy had his eyes. The same deep, reflective, searching gaze Kyle had carried since childhood. He knew before logic even formed. The boy was his. He stepped forward, voice trembling despite his rehearsed billionaire confidence. "Andrea, why is he looking at me like that?" She swallowed, steady but vulnerable. "Because, Kyle, he's yours." Every whisper in the room died. Every mask of politeness cracked. And the life Kyle had built on spotless reputation was seconds from shattering. Cut. Family. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to bury a part of your past? A mistake, a heartbreak, a truth, only for it to show up at the worst possible moment, demanding to be faced? Have you ever convinced yourself that running away would make everything disappear? Or maybe you've been the one carrying the truth alone, hoping one day the person who hurt you would finally understand what they left behind. If so, this story is for you. Because tonight, Kyle isn't just confronting a child he never knew he had. He's confronting the man he became while chasing the life he thought would make him whole. Tonight, Andrea isn't just revealing a truth. She's standing in front of a man she once loved. A man who broke her heart without even realizing the depth of the wound. And Leon, the little boy, is about to meet the father he's only known in bedtime stories. The problem? Kyle built an empire on discipline, control, and a spotless public image. And nothing destroys control faster than truth. Stay with me until the end, family, because here's what you'll discover in this story. What happened between Kyle and Andrea 4 years ago, why she kept the pregnancy a secret. The real reason Kyle sent that unexpected invitation, how one little boy changed the heart of a billionaire, and how love, broken, bruised, but honest, can still rebuild itself. You're about to witness a story of love, regret, responsibility, and redemption. So lean in, because we're just getting started. Before we dive deeper, family, if you love powerful storytelling with real-life lessons, do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe if you're new, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps stories like this alive. Now, let's go back to the beginning, to where everything started. The past that refused to stay buried. Kyle Renshaw, the boy before the billionaire. People see the polished version of Kyle now. The magazine covers, the Forbes interviews, the skyscraper with his name on it. But long before the world knew him as a tech genius billionaire, Kyle was just a boy from a neighborhood where dreams were luxuries. His parents worked paycheck to paycheck. Second-hand clothes, skipped meals, bills that piled up like heavy shadows across their kitchen table. He didn't grow up with privilege. He grew up with pressure. Pressure to be more, to break the cycle, to build something no one in his family ever had. Stability. He coded in basement cafes, slept in his old hatchback car, pitched investors who told him he was too young, too ordinary, or not impressive enough. And when the world finally recognized his brilliance, when that first life-changing investment poured in, he became someone new, focused, driven, sharp around the edges. Success changes your environment first. Then, slowly, it changes you. And Kyle didn't even notice it happening. Not until someone from his past forced him to see what he left behind. The first time, Kyle saw Andrea, years before the fancy suits and high-rise boardrooms. There was a tech convention in a modest, buzzing auditorium. Kyle was nobody. Just one more programmer trying to be seen, trying to be valid. Andrea was an artist with a stylus and a laptop, creating digital designs to support her little sister and aging grandmother. Where Kyle was ambition, Andrea was heart. Where Kyle was restless, Andrea was calm. Where Kyle was loud in his dreams, Andrea was quiet in her courage. He noticed her first, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she focused, the softness in her posture, the steadiness in her presence. They met over shared ideas, broken pencils, and cheap convention snacks. Conversation flowed effortlessly, not forced, not strategic, but natural. And somewhere between the late-night brainstorming sessions, the mutual encouragement, and the gentle laughter that made even Kyle's stress loosen its grip, they fell into something neither expected, something real, something beautiful. But life has a way of testing every beautiful thing. And when the investment call came, the one that changed everything, Kyle didn't realize he wasn't just walking towards success. He was walking away from her, when success demands sacrifice. At first, they tried to make it work, but calls became shorter. Texts grew colder. Kyle's voice turned businesslike, even with the woman he claimed to care for. Andrea felt him slipping through her fingers, not because he stopped liking her, but because he no longer had space for the softer parts of life. One night, during a rushed conversation between meetings, Kyle ended it. "I can't do this relationship right now." Simple words. Cold delivery. Devastating impact. Andrea didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't guilt-trip him. She just let him walk away. With grace he didn't deserve. 2 weeks later, her life changed forever. The moment everything changed for Andrea. Andrea sat alone in that small clinic room, the walls painted a fading mint green, a color that felt far too calm for what was happening in her chest. She held the ultrasound picture with trembling fingers, a blurry little silhouette, no bigger than a bean, yet already powerful enough to change the rest of her life. The doctor's words echoed. "You're about 8 weeks along." 8 weeks. 2 months. Right after Kyle walked away, her heart felt too full and too empty all at once. Confusion wrapped itself around her thoughts. How will I do this alone? Should I tell him? Would he even care? That last question cut deeper than any other. She had known 2 versions of Kyle, the dreamer with fire in his eyes, and the rising star whose ambition started burning everything soft around him. Which one would she be showing this picture to? And more importantly, which one would show up for the child? Silence answered for her, and silence hurts in a way words never can. Andrea closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. She didn't want to force herself into his new life. She didn't want to be labeled as someone looking for money, clout, or security. She didn't want her child growing up as a footnote in a billionaire's career. So she made a decision. She would raise this child with love, with dignity, with or without Kyle Renshaw. And just like that, her life found a new purpose, a mother's quiet strength. The hardest years become the most meaningful. People think strength is loud, bold, visible, but Andrea's strength showed up quietly. In early mornings, late nights, skipped meals, and relentless perseverance. She worked double shifts at a small design studio, took freelance gigs at odd hours, did commissions even when her hands shook from exhaustion. She saved every penny, held every fear close to her chest, fought every doubt with grit. Some nights she cried into her pillow, not because she regretted her child, but because she feared not being enough. Yet every time she felt herself breaking, she placed a hand on her stomach and remembered the little life growing inside her. Love gave her endurance. Purpose gave her strength. And when she held her newborn son for the first time, the world finally felt right. She named him Leon, a name that meant grace and connection in several languages. He came into the world with a calmness that mirrored her own and eyes that mirrored someone else's. Kyle's, deep, curious, searching. Sometimes that resemblance made her heart ache. Sometimes it made her smile, but she carried the truth alone, not out of anger, but out of protection. Leon, a reflection of the father he never knew. Leon wasn't a loud child. He was a thinker, the kind of boy who took toys apart just to see how they worked, then reassembled them into something better. He asked questions other toddlers didn't ask. Why does the moon follow us home? Where do ideas sleep at night? Why do people forget things they love? Andrea would pause, smile, and answer as best she could. But one question, one she had feared for years, was still waiting. He looked just like Kyle. Right down to the thoughtful pause before speaking, that same furrowed brow when he concentrated, that same softness when he saw someone hurting. There was no denying who his father was. Not to Andrea, not to the world, not to Kyle, if he ever found out. Sometimes Andrea caught herself imagining what Kyle would think if he saw Leon. Would he be proud? Would he regret leaving? Would he even feel anything? Those thoughts lingered only for a moment before she pushed them away. She had chosen this path, chosen independence, chosen peace. But life has a way of circling back to the moments we avoid. Why Andrea stayed silent? Family, people often ask. Why wouldn't she just tell him? The answer cuts deeper than you think. Andrea didn't want to knock on his mansion gates and introduce him to a responsibility he never signed up for. She didn't want her pregnancy used by tabloids or weaponized by investors or twisted into a scandal. She didn't want her child growing up with cameras in his face, comment sections tearing him apart, or critics questioning Andrea's motives. And she didn't want Leon to grow up feeling like a burden or like a mistake someone tried to hide. So she held the truth close, not to punish Kyle, but to protect her son. It was quiet bravery, the kind of bravery the world rarely applauds. Family. If you've ever had to make a hard decision for someone you love, even when it broke your heart a little, dropper in the comments. Your quiet strength deserves to be seen. All right. Let's move to the moment everything changed. The invitation she was never supposed to accept. Kyle's restless success. By year 4 of fatherhood, Andrea never told him about. Kyle was everywhere. Magazine covers, podcasts, business panels, late-night talk shows, awards, spotlights, champagne toasts. He had everything he dreamed of. But dreams, when achieved without grounding, don't feel like dreams. They feel like hunger. Endless hunger. Kyle bought a penthouse, a private jet, offshore investments, luxury everything, but none of it filled the quiet ache inside him. Nights were the worst. Success echoed in empty hallways. Silence reminded him of something, someone, but he pushed the thought away. Until the one moment he couldn't. The Renshaw family dinner announcement. The Renshaw estate was preparing for a prestigious charity dinner. Guests from politics, philanthropy, business, entertainment. Kyle's parents had a major announcement that night. A philanthropic initiative in Kyle's honor. Everything needed to be perfect. The family image, the PR, the legacy. Kyle moved through the preparations like a machine, until his mother said one simple line. You should invite people from your past too, Kyle. People who mattered. People who mattered. That's when it hit him. Andrea's face, memory soft but still painfully clear, surfaced with force. His mother didn't know the weight of what she'd said. Kyle did. That night, he stared at his phone for nearly 30 minutes before sending a short, polite message. Just an invitation. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. He didn't expect a reply. He didn't expect anything. And he certainly didn't expect what happened next. The decision Andrea never planned to make. Andrea saw the message while folding Lian's clothes. At first, she thought it was a mistake. A spam text. A joke. Then she read it again. Her heart dropped. Not out of excitement, but out of fear. She hadn't seen Kyle in 4 years. He didn't know about Lian. He didn't know anything. Why invite her now? Why after all this time? She almost deleted the message, but then Lian asked the question she'd been dreading for years. Mom, who is my dad? Her breath hitched. Her hands stilled. Her heart broke and strengthened in the same moment. Andrea made a decision, not for herself, but for her son. It was time. Time for truth. Time for answers. Time for Lian to meet the man whose eyes he carried. So she replied, I'll be there, and fate exhaled. The evening of the Renshaw dinner arrived with the kind of quiet intensity that settles over life right before something big happens. Andrea stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of her soft, simple dress. It wasn't designer, it wasn't flashy, but it was her, elegant, understated, and honest. Behind her, Lian sat on the bed swinging his legs, his little dress shoes tapping the mattress rhythmically. He looked adorable, slightly nervous, and endlessly curious. Mom, he asked softly, will my dad like me? Andrea froze. She crouched to meet his eyes, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. He's going to be surprised, she said gently. But you are impossible not to love. Lian's face brightened with a shy smile, and Andrea's heart squeezed. She grabbed her purse, took his hand, and together they stepped outside into a night that smelled of new beginnings and old truths. The Renshaw estate came into view as their car approached, a sprawling property that rose like a monument to wealth. Its towering pillars and glowing windows made the place look like a palace. But inside that palace, someone was about to be humbled. The doors opened, and the guests drifted through the grand foyer in clusters, laughing softly, clinking glasses, exchanging polite whispers. But Andrea didn't hear any of it. Her heartbeat drowned out the noise. She stepped in with quiet confidence, Leon's small hand tucked securely in hers. And then it happened. A ripple spread across the room. A hush. A shift in the air, almost palpable. Heads turned. Voices paused. Every whisper carried a single curiosity. Who is she? And who is the child? Andrea felt dozens of eyes on her, but she didn't shrink back. She held her chin high, her expression gentle but unshaken. And then she saw him. Kyle stood near the base of the grand staircase, mid-conversation with a journalist. His posture was rigidly perfect, his polished smile rehearsed. He looked every bit the billionaire mastermind the world admired, until his gaze landed on her. The smile faded. The charm slipped. The billionaire persona cracked. He looked stunned, wind-struck, unsteady. He excused himself from the journalist with a shaky, I'll be right back. Then he walked toward Andrea, each step slower than the last, like he was approaching a ghost from a life he barely remembered living. Andrea, he breathed, eyes wide. You came. Her voice was soft but steady. You invited me. His eyes drifted down to the little boy holding her hand. And the world stopped. Kyle stared. Long. Longer. His breath caught. The boy's eyes, his eyes, looked back at him with innocent curiosity. Kyle's voice fell into a whisper. And who is this? Andrea inhaled deeply, kneeling beside her son. This is Leon, she said. My son. Kyle swallowed hard. Your son. Andrea rose again, her gaze never flinching. Yes, she didn't explain. She didn't soften it. She didn't try to cushion the impact. She let the truth stand on its own. Kyle's voice cracked. Is he? Yours, she finished quietly. Yes, gasps echoed around them. Polite guests tried pretending they weren't staring, but everyone was watching. Kyle stumbled back a half step, like the ground had shifted beneath him. Regret crashed into his eyes. Guilt followed. Then, something deeper, something that hurt him to feel. Recognition. The past had finally caught up, and it came with tiny hands and a shy, uncertain smile. Andrea squeezed Leanne's hand reassuringly, and the boy leaned closer to her leg, sensing the heaviness in the air. Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Andrea, why didn't you? She cut him off, gently. Not here. There was no anger in her voice, just truth wrapped in dignity. Kyle nodded, chest rising and falling too quickly. A server passed by awkwardly, pretending not to witness the unraveling of a billionaire's perfect life. Andrea turned slightly to Leanne. It's okay, sweetheart. Do you want to look at the paintings on the wall while I talk to Mr. Renshaw? Leanne nodded and wandered only a few steps away, still within sight. Kyle watched him walk, every movement breaking him a little more. He looked back at Andrea, voice raw. Can we talk somewhere private? She nodded. Kyle gestured toward the back of the estate, and together they stepped away from the glittering social facade into something far more real and far more painful. The garden behind the estate was quiet, bathed in soft moonlight. The air smelled faintly of roses and earth. It felt like the kind of place where truths, heavy, fragile truths, could finally breathe. Andrea wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling the weight of 4 years settle over her shoulders. Kyle stood a few steps away, unable to fully approach her, unable to fully retreat. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked with hurt he didn't know he still carried. Andrea didn't answer immediately. She let the question hang between them, heavy and honest. Then she said, "Because you were living your dream. And I refused to become the thing people used to pull you down or manipulate you with. You worked too hard for everything you had." "I had a right to know," Kyle whispered. "And I had the right to protect my child," she replied softly, "from the cameras, from the scrutiny, from being your obligation." Kyle winced at the last word. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but the truth hurt anyway. Silence stretched between them. 4 years of missed moments, unheard cries, untold stories. Finally, Kyle exhaled. "So why come now?" This time, her answer landed like a blow softened by love. "Because Leon asked who his father was. And I didn't want him growing up wondering if he wasn't wanted." Kyle's knees almost buckled. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. The strength she carried, the sacrifices she made, the love she gave alone. Then a small voice broke the moment. "Mom." They turned. Leon stood with his hands fidgeting in front of him. He looked up at Kyle with innocent eyes. "Are you my dad?" Andrea's breath hitched. Kyle's entire world caved in. He knelt slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered, voice trembling. "Only if you want me to be—" Leon blinked, then stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around Kyle's neck. Andrea pressed a hand to her mouth as tears finally overflowed. A billionaire fell apart and healed in the arms of a child he never knew he had. Family. If this moment touched you even a little, tap that like button so more people can discover stories that remind us what really matters in life. Kyle stayed kneeling long after Leon's arms loosened from around his neck. It wasn't just the boy's embrace that shook him, it was the realization of everything he had missed. 4 years of firsts, first words, first steps, first birthdays. 4 years of laughter that never echoed through his own home. The weight of it pressed against his chest until he could barely breathe. He finally stood, gently ruffling Leon's hair. "You're amazing," Kyle whispered. Leon smiled shyly, then darted back toward the flowers he'd been admiring earlier. Kyle watched him with a softened gaze before turning back to Andrea. "Andrea, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied quietly. "Not yet." "I'm sorry," he blurted out. She didn't respond immediately. The apology hung between them like a fragile truth finally spoken. Kyle took a slow step toward her, but she held her ground, neither drawing him closer nor pushing him away. "I'm sorry for leaving," he continued, "for choosing ambition over everything else, for not realizing what I had until I lost it, for missing his life, for missing you." Andrea's eyes flickered with emotion, but her walls didn't crumble instantly. She had built those walls with experience, with heartbreak, with survival. "Kyle," she murmured, "you were building the life you always dreamed of, and I lost the only part of that life that actually mattered." he said softly. A breeze moved through the garden, brushing loose strands of Andrea's hair across her cheek. Kyle lifted a hand instinctively, then stopped himself, caught between longing and respect for the boundaries she no longer voiced but clearly needed. Andrea tucked the strand behind her ear herself, her gaze drifting toward Lian. He was kneeling in the grass, humming a soft tune, fully unaware of the emotional hurricane swirling around the adults. Watching him seemed to soften something inside her. "I'm not angry at you," she said at last. Kyle blinked. "You're not?" She shook her head. "No. Hurt? Yes. Disappointed? Definitely. But angry? No. Anger fades. What remains is acceptance." Kyle's eyes shimmered slightly. "And forgiveness?" Andrea breathed in deeply, her chest rising and falling with a painful tenderness. "I'm working on it." It wasn't yes. It wasn't no. But it was honest. And honesty was the first step toward anything worth rebuilding. Kyle exhaled shakily. "Can I spend time with him? Tonight? Just a little?" Andrea studied him carefully. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't entitled. He was asking. And that alone showed a version of Kyle she hadn't seen in years. She nodded. "Let's take it slowly. But yes, you can." Kyle walked over to where Lian was now examining a butterfly resting on a rose petal. The boy looked up at him and grinned. "Look." "He likes me," Lian whispered excitedly. Kyle knelt beside him. "He has good taste," he whispered back. Andrea watched from a few steps away, her heart tugging in two directions, pulling her toward hope and warning her against risk. She wasn't sure which one she trusted more. As Kyle gently showed Lian how to cup his hand near the butterfly without scaring it, Andrea found herself remembering little moments from years before. Kyle laughing in cheap diners. Kyle sketching new app ideas on napkins. Kyle telling her late at night, "I don't want to be rich. I want to build something that matters." Somewhere along the way, that dreamer had gotten lost. But watching him now, on his knees in a garden, teaching their son to be gentle, she saw the old Kyle flicker back to life, and that flicker scared her as much as it warmed her. Because once you've rebuilt your heart alone, letting someone back in is the scariest kind of courage. When they returned to the edge of the garden path, the glow from the estate windows spilled over them like soft gold. Laughter and clinking glasses drifted from inside, reminders that the world continued moving even when their own had paused. Andrea wrapped her arms around herself again. "Kyle, your family's inside. What are you going to tell them?" Kyle looked toward the mansion, then back at Lian, then finally at Andrea. "The truth," he said. Her breath caught. "Are you sure?" She pressed gently. "This will change everything. Your reputation, your image, your relationships. It should change everything," he said simply. "It's real." Andrea wasn't used to this version of him. Not the polished CEO, not the distant rising star, but a man speaking from his actual heart. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right." Just then, Kyle's mother stepped out onto the terrace, clearly searching for him. She spotted Kyle first, then followed his line of sight toward Andrea and Lian. Her expression shifted, from confusion to surprise to cautious understanding. She walked over slowly, her elegant evening gown brushing the stone tiles. "Kyle, sweetheart, everyone is waiting, and—" She stopped when she reached them. Andrea felt Lian step closer to her leg, sensing the tension of a stranger's gaze. Kyle cleared his throat softly. Mom, this is Andrea. Mrs. Renshaw offered a measured smile. Yes, I remember her. From years ago. And, Kyle continued, his voice tightening with vulnerability, this is my son. Leanne, a sharp breath escaped her lips. Her eyes widened, stunned not with cruelty, but with the shock of a truth she hadn't been prepared to meet. She looked at Leanne's face again. Really looked. And in an instant, the recognition landed. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh, Kyle. She glanced at Andrea, then softened her expression. You've raised him beautifully. Andrea blinked, surprised by the grace in the woman's voice. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Renshaw nodded, then stepped closer, bending slightly so she was eye level with Leanne. Hello, sweetheart, she said gently. I'm your grandmother. Leanne's eyes widened. You're really rich, he said matter-of-factly. Mrs. Renshaw let out a breathy laugh, touched and amused. I suppose I am. Then she looked at Kyle, with a gaze only mothers can give. A mixture of pride, disappointment, and unconditional love. Bring them inside, she said softly. Your father will want to meet his grandson. Andrea stiffened, suddenly unsure. Kyle noticed immediately. He leaned close, voice low and warm. You don't have to stay long. You don't have to answer questions. I'm right here. We do this together. Andrea held his gaze, something in his eyes. Something true, something gentle, made her exhale and nod. Okay, she murmured. Kyle offered his hand, not grabbing, not assuming, just offering. Andrea hesitated. Then slowly, she placed her hand in his. And together, they walked toward the brightly lit doorway of the Renshaw estate, with Leanne's tiny fingers wrapped securely around both of theirs. The moment Andrea stepped back inside the mansion, the atmosphere shifted again. Subtle, but undeniable. Conversations dipped ever so slightly. Eyes flickered in their direction. Curiosity rose like steam off warm pavement. But this time, Andrea didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She didn't lower her gaze. She moved forward with quiet strength, Leanne's hand in hers, and Kyle at her side. For the first time, in a very long time, the three of them formed a picture no one in that room could fully understand yet, but everyone felt was important. Kyle's father stood near the grand dining table, commanding attention without trying. Tall, silver-haired, distinguished. A man whose approval held weight far beyond the walls of this estate. He was speaking with a senator when Kyle approached, and he paused mid-sentence when he noticed the trio. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Kyle," he said, tone even. "We were beginning to wonder where you'd gone." Kyle cleared his throat. "There's someone I want you to meet." His father looked at Andrea first, recognition passing over his face. Then his gaze lowered to Leanne. A beat. 2 beats. 3. Then the older man inhaled deeply, adjusting his posture. He wasn't stupid. He didn't need an explanation. Andrea felt Leanne's grip tighten around her fingers, and she gently squeezed back, steady, grounding. Kyle's father finally spoke. "What is the child's name?" Andrea stepped forward, her voice calm but warm. "His name is Leon." Mr. Renshaw studied the boy's face, those familiar eyes, that thoughtful stillness. "Leon," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "A good name." He crouched slightly, lowering himself so he wasn't towering over the child. And how old are you, young man? Lian held up 4 fingers proudly. I'm this many. Mr. Renshaw's stern expression cracked into the faintest smile. I see. Then he straightened and turned to Kyle. Why was I not informed of his existence? The question wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. But it held weight, pressure that made the air feel tighter. Kyle swallowed. I didn't know. His father's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like disappointment, then something softer. And now that you do know, he said quietly, what are you planning to do? Kyle looked at Andrea, then at Lian, and his answer was simple. Everything I should have done from the beginning. Silence stretched. People at nearby tables tried to pretend they weren't listening. Finally, Mr. Renshaw exhaled slowly and nodded. Then start tonight. Andrea blinked. Tonight? Mr. Renshaw met her gaze fully for the first time. Any child of my son's is family, and any woman who raised him with such dignity is welcome in my home. Andrea didn't expect tears to prick her eyes. Kindness can be overwhelming when you've spent years preparing for judgment. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once in acknowledgement. But not everyone in the room was so composed. Across the dining hall, 2 board members whispered harshly behind their champagne glasses. Someone else raised an eyebrow. A journalist tried to discreetly lift a camera before a security guard blocked the shot. The room was a storm of reactions. Shock, confusion, intrigue. Kyle looked around, jaw tightening. I should have prepared for this. Andrea shook her head softly. You couldn't prepare for this. No one could. He huffed out a breath that was half frustration, half laughter at the absurdity of his own life. She smiled faintly, and for a moment the sharp edges between them softened again. Dinner was served shortly after. Andrea sat between Kyle and Lian at the long table, the chandelier above glowing like captured starlight. Servers moved gracefully, placing plates of elegantly prepared dishes. Truffle risotto, roasted vegetables, dishes Andrea could barely pronounce but appreciated anyway. Lian, however, poked his risotto with skeptical curiosity. Mom, he whispered loudly, why is the rice wet? A few guests chuckled under their breath. Andrea stifled a laugh. It's fancy food, sweetheart, she whispered. Oh, so it's supposed to be weird. Kyle tried to hide his smile behind his wineglass. Andrea felt her shoulders relax a little more. Despite the tension that hovered, despite the whispers, despite the storm of emotions still swirling around them, this felt almost normal, almost like a family. And Kyle felt it too. The strange, surprising ease of sitting beside the woman he once loved and the child he never knew he had yet felt deeply connected to already. Halfway through dinner, Mr. Renshaw stood to make the charity announcement he'd prepared for weeks. All eyes shifted to him. But Andrea noticed something. Kyle wasn't watching his father. He was watching her. Watching the way she cut Lian's food into smaller pieces. Watching the soft way she spoke to their son. Watching the grace with which she sat in a room full of power and wealth without shrinking. And underneath all that watching, something was growing. Not desire, not nostalgia, something quieter, something deeper, longing, not just for her, but for the version of himself he had been with her, before the world demanded so much of him that he forgot the things that mattered most. Andrea caught his gaze and looked away quickly, heart fluttering with confusion she didn't want to acknowledge. Kyle cleared his throat and faced forward again, gripping his wine glass like it anchored him. After the announcement and applause faded, dessert was served, a delicate crème brûlée that Leanne immediately declared the best pudding ever, making several guests smile. Kyle leaned closer to Andrea, his voice low. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know this wasn't easy." Andrea took a slow breath. "It wasn't," she admitted. "But it was necessary for Leon," he asked. She hesitated. "For all of us," she finally said. Kyle's eyes softened. He didn't push, didn't assume, didn't rush to claim something that wasn't his anymore. He simply nodded. And for the first time, Andrea didn't feel resistance building inside her. She felt something else, possibility. As dinner wrapped up and guests began to mingle again, Mrs. Renshaw approached Andrea with an expression that was almost maternal. "If you ever need support," she said gently, "please know our door is open." Andrea's throat tightened. "That's very kind." "It's not kindness," Mrs. Renshaw replied, glancing toward Leon with soft eyes. "It's family." Andrea looked down, blinking back emotion she didn't expect to feel in this mansion, of all places. Meanwhile, Kyle's father pulled his son aside, speaking in low tones that didn't carry far. "This will change things," he said. "Your image. The company's optics." "I know," Kyle replied. "Are you ready for that responsibility?" Kyle looked toward Andrea and Leanne, toward the life he had walked away from and finally returned to. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." His father studied him carefully, then nodded once in approval. "Good. Then act like it." Kyle straightened, and in that moment, he wasn't the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. He was a father. Eventually, the dinner began to wind down. Guests drifted out into the hallway, retrieving coats, exchanging farewells, and whispering theories about the child who looked so unmistakably like a Renshaw. Andrea stood near the entrance, with Leon beside her, gently helping him into his jacket. She smoothed his collar and brushed a tiny crumb of dessert from his cheek. "Did you have fun tonight?" she asked softly. Leanne nodded enthusiastically. "The pudding was the best thing ever. And the butterfly. And," he paused, thought for a second, "and meeting my dad." Andrea's breath caught, her eyes softening. She knelt and kissed his forehead. "I'm glad, sweetheart." Behind them, Kyle watched quietly, hands in his pockets, expression soft but unreadable. He stepped closer. "I can walk you both out," he offered. Andrea hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Okay." They moved together through the grand foyer and stepped outside where the night air felt cool and grounding after the heavy warmth inside. The estate grounds were quiet now, the moon casting silver over the long driveway. A gentle breeze picked up, brushing Andrea's hair back as she walked. Kyle glanced at her, noticing the way she held herself. Strong, poised, but tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of doing everything alone. He stopped, near the garden path. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. "Just a little longer?" Andrea shifted her weight. It would be so easy to say no, to protect herself, to shut the door before hope had a chance to slip in. But Leon tugged her hand and whispered, "I'm not sleepy yet." She smiled faintly at her son, then looked at Kyle. "All right," she murmured. "A little longer." They walked to a quiet corner of the garden, where a stone bench sat beneath a canopy of climbing vines. From there, they could still see Leon safely, playing with shadows on the pathway and humming to himself. Andrea sat on one end of the bench. Kyle sat on the other, not close but not far, a respectful distance. For a long moment, silence lived between them, not tense, not awkward, just thoughtful. Kyle broke it first. "I should have checked on you," he said, voice low. "After we broke things off, I should have made sure you were okay." Andrea looked down at her hands. "You were busy building your dream. I used that as an excuse," he admitted. His voice didn't sound like the confident CEO America admired. It sounded like the young man she once brainstormed with at midnight, the one who believed kindness mattered more than money. "I didn't leave because I didn't care," Carl continued. "I left because I was terrified. I was afraid I'd fail. Afraid I'd never be enough. Afraid I'd lose everything before I even had anything." Andrea listened quietly. And when the investors came, he said, "They made it clear. Distractions could cost me everything. And I let myself believe that meant you." A soft ache bloomed in Andrea's chest, not from anger. She had healed past that, but from understanding the pain behind his choices. "Kyle," she said gently, "I never asked you to give up your dreams." "I know," he murmured, voice thick. "I asked myself to, and then I resented you for something you never did." Andrea inhaled slowly, letting the honesty settle in her heart. "I didn't want to be the thing that made you choose," she whispered. "You already carried so much pressure." He turned toward her more fully. "You were the one thing that made the pressure bearable." Andrea blinked, caught off guard by the softness in his words. Kyle rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm not telling you this to win you back," he said carefully. "I'm telling you because you deserved to hear the truth a long time ago." Andrea looked away, eyes shimmering. "I spent so many nights wondering if I made the right choice," she confessed. "Keeping the pregnancy to myself, raising Leon alone, doing everything without you." "You did an incredible job," Kyle said immediately. "He's brilliant, kind, curious. That's because of you." Andrea gave him a small smile, grateful but still guarded. "Maybe," she whispered. "But he deserved both of us." Kyle's expression tightened with guilt. "I know." She nodded gently. "I didn't keep him from you to punish you. I did it to protect him, and myself. I didn't want to bring a child into a world where he might become a PR liability or a secret someone had to hide." Kyle pressed a hand to his forehead, breathing shakily. "I would never—" "You don't know that," she interrupted softly. "And neither did I. You were changing, Kyle. Faster than I could understand. Faster than you could control. Fame changes people, even good ones." He looked at her with pain and admiration swirling in his eyes. "I don't want to be that man anymore." Andrea held his gaze. "And who do you want to be now?" Kyle glanced toward Leon, who was now chasing fireflies with innocent delight. "I want to be his father," he said simply. "A real one. Not just biologically, emotionally, consistently, completely." Andrea swallowed. "And me." Kyle's voice softened into something fragile and hopeful. "I want to earn your forgiveness, earn your trust, and if life is kind to me, maybe one day earn a place in your heart again." Andrea felt her breath tremble. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't assuming. He wasn't pushing. He was offering something rare, something she hadn't heard from him since their early days. Honesty, gentleness, effort. She looked down at her hands, then at him. Kyle, I don't know if I can trust you like that again, she admitted. He nodded, accepting it without flinching. I wouldn't trust me either. Not yet. Andrea let out a soft, surprised laugh. It eased some of the tension between them. Kyle offered a small smile. I just want a chance to show you I can be better. Not overnight, but consistently. Step by step, Andrea looked at him for a long moment, searching, weighing, feeling, and her heart, carefully protected, fiercely guarded, softened just a little. Step by step, she echoed quietly. Kyle's smile widened, but he kept it contained, respectful of her boundaries. Andrea, he whispered, may I walk you both to your car? She nodded. Yes, you can. As they returned to the driveway, Leon ran ahead for a moment, chasing the last flickers of firelight before the insects escaped into the dark. Andrea laughed softly. Kyle watched her laugh like it was sunlight warming a place inside him he thought was permanently cold. He stepped closer, not touching, just nearby. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? She asked. For not giving up on life when I gave up on us. Andrea looked at him, surprised by the depth in his words. I didn't give up, she murmured. I just redirected. Sometimes life requires rerouting. He nodded, slowly. And sometimes, he said, life gives you another chance to find the road you never should have left. Andrea's chest tightened with something dangerously close to hope, but she didn't let it take over. Not yet. She opened the car door and helped Leon climb into his seat. Kyle stood at the side, uncertain if he should step closer or keep his distance. Andrea buckled her son in, then turned back to Kyle. We'll talk again, she said softly. A simple sentence, but it held possibility. Kyle nodded, swallowing emotion he didn't try to hide. I'd really like that. She offered a faint, genuine smile. Good night, Kyle. Good night, Andrea. She closed the door gently, started the car, and pulled away. Kyle stood in the driveway long after the taillights disappeared down the long estate road. He didn't feel empty tonight. For the first time in years, he felt hopeful. The next morning, sunlight poured through Kyle's penthouse windows in a way it hadn't in years. Normally, he woke to silence, the kind of silence that felt heavy, echoing through too much empty space. But today, the silence felt different, less hollow, full of something he couldn't name. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring down at the city that once felt like the center of his world. Today, it felt small compared to what he'd discovered. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message from Andrea. He's asking if he can see you today. Kyle exhaled shakily, a smile breaking across his face before he could stop it. He typed back immediately. Tell him I would love that. Whatever time works for you. 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, come around noon. He wants to show you something. He drew. Kyle felt his chest swell with something warm and unfamiliar. Joy, not the kind tied to investment rounds or media praise. A purer kind. He showered, dressed in something casual rather than his usual CEO armor, and for once, he didn't think about work at all. Meanwhile, Andrea sat at her kitchen table while Leon colored furiously with crayons, humming to himself. You think he'll like my picture? Leon asked, his tongue poking out in concentration. I think he'll love it, Andrea said softly. Lian grinned, scribbling a little sun in the corner of his page. He drew two tall figures holding the hands of a smaller one. Andrea's heart squeezed. She looked at her son, the hope in his eyes, the curiosity, the innocence, and felt a familiar mix of love and fear. Was she doing the right thing? Opening this door, letting Kyle in? It was too early to know the answer. But seeing Lian's excitement made one thing clear. He needed this. Maybe they all did. When noon came, a knock sounded at the door. Andrea opened it to find Kyle standing there. Not the CEO version, not the polished public figure, but the man she used to know. Casual shirt, soft smile, nervous energy radiating off him. "Hi," Andrea said. He breathed. Then Lian raced into the room. "You came." Kyle knelt instantly, arms open wide. "Of course I did." The boy ran straight into his embrace. Andrea blinked back unexpected emotion. This was what 4 years of silence stole from them. And now they were slowly reclaiming it. Lian tugged Kyle's arm excitedly. "Come see. I made something." He pulled the billionaire toward the small kitchen table covered in crayons, markers, and construction paper. Kyle sat in a tiny chair far too small for him, knees sticking out awkwardly. Andrea couldn't stop a soft laugh escaping. Lian proudly held up his drawing. "This is you," he pointed. "And Mommy. And me." Kyle's heart clenched painfully, beautifully. He traced a finger over the 3 stick figures holding hands. "It's perfect," he whispered. Lian beamed. Andrea looked away for a moment, swallowing emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Kyle caught the flicker of vulnerability on her face, and something softened inside him even more. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For raising him so well. For letting him be this. Happy. Loved." Andrea's lips parted slightly. She wasn't used to him speaking with such sincerity. "It wasn't always easy," she admitted. "I know," he said. "And I wasn't there to help. I can't change that. But I'm here now. For real. For however long you'll let me be." She nodded slowly, cautiously. "Consistency, Kyle. That's what matters. I'll earn it," he promised. Not loud, not dramatic. Just steady. Andrea's chest warmed, though she tried not to show it. They spent the afternoon together. Lian showed Kyle his favorite toys. The robot he'd fixed, though it was originally broken because Lian had taken it apart. His tiny plant he'd grown from a seed. A picture book he insisted on reading himself. Every time the boy said "Dad," Kyle's eyes shimmered like it was the first time he'd ever heard the word. Andrea noticed. She also noticed how patient he was with Lian, how gentle, how fully present. It wasn't the Kyle she remembered from the end of their relationship, stressed, distant, consumed by ambition. This was the Kyle she had fallen for years ago. The dreamer, the gentle soul, the man who once whispered at midnight that family mattered more than fortune. The question was, could this version of him last? She wasn't ready to answer that, but she was willing to watch. Later that evening, after Lian fell asleep during a cartoon, his tiny head resting on a pillow beside him, Andrea draped a blanket over him and stepped carefully into the hallway. Kyle followed quietly, not wanting to disturb their son. They stood in the dim light of the hallway, silence stretching like a soft blanket around them. He's incredible, Kyle whispered. Andrea nodded. He is. You did so much on your own, he said. More than I can ever repay. She shook her head. I didn't do it to be owed anything. I know, he said, which is why I want to be part of his life, because you never used him. You never came to me for money, for help, for anything. You protected him from the chaos of my world. She looked up at him, searching his face. Would you have protected him? Kyle's voice broke a little. I didn't protect you. And that was the first mistake. Andrea blinked, caught off guard. Kyle inhaled slowly, steadying himself. I hurt you. I know I did, and I regret it every single day. But I want you to know something. I never stopped caring. She exhaled shakily. Kyle, I don't expect anything. I don't want to push you. I just want to be here, for him, and for you, if you ever let me be. Her eyes softened, but remained cautious. It's not that simple, she whispered. I don't want simple, Kyle replied. I want honest. Andrea looked away, processing his words. Honesty. It had been missing for so long. Maybe now they could build something from it. Not quickly, not recklessly, but carefully, step by step. She met his eyes again. Then we'll take it slow, she said. A slow smile touched Kyle's lips. Slow is good. They stood in silence, a moment longer, the tension between them shifting, less sharp, more warm, more possible. Then Andrea spoke softly. You should go home. It's late. Kyle nodded. I'll see you tomorrow. Andrea hesitated just long enough to make his heart race, then nodded. Yes, Kyle. Tomorrow. He released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Good night, Andrea. Good night. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. Andrea leaned back against it, pressing a hand over her heart. She wasn't falling again. Not yet. But something inside her had undeniably begun to thaw, and she wasn't sure whether it scared her or gave her hope. The next morning began peacefully. Andrea brewed coffee in her small kitchen, while Leon ate cereal at the table, swinging his feet above the floor. There was a lightness in the air, subtle but present, a feeling Andrea hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. But life rarely lets hope settle without testing it. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice, 5 times. She frowned and reached for it. Then her heart dropped. Messages from friends, old co-workers, unknown numbers, all the same theme. Is it true? Is the child Kyle's? Call me, Andrea. Andrea's fingers trembled as she opened a news alert. A headline blared across the screen. Billionaire Kyle Renshaw seen with secret son and former lover. Photos leak. Her stomach twisted, cold and sharp. She clicked the article. There, in full color, were photos of last night's dinner. Her walking into the estate. Kyle kneeling to speak to Leon. Leon hugging him in the garden. Andrea standing beside him with tears in her eyes. Private moments. Stolen, exposed, her breath hitched. Mom? Leon asked, noticing the fear in her eyes. She quickly flipped the phone face down, forcing a steady exhale. It's okay, sweetheart, she murmured. Finish your breakfast. But it wasn't okay. Not at all. Her safe little life, quiet, private, protected, was now a headline, a story a spectacle. The exact nightmare she'd tried to avoid for 4 years. Her hands shook as she texted Kyle. "Did you see the news?" He responded immediately. "I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, Kyle burst through the door with urgency in his eyes. Not the frantic panic of someone afraid of scandal, but the fierce protectiveness of a man afraid for his family. Andrea stood in the kitchen, arms crossed tight, her posture trembling between fury and fear. Kyle approached slowly. "Andrea, how did this happen?" she demanded, voice cracking. "We were careful. They had no reason to photograph us." Kyle's jaw clenched. The dinner was full of media-adjacent people. Someone must have thought they could profit off the story. Andrea shook her head, chest tight. "I didn't want him in the spotlight, Kyle. This is exactly what I feared." Her hands covered her face. Kyle stepped closer, voice gentle but steady. "Andrea, look at me." She didn't. "Andrea." She lowered her hands, eyes wet with frustration. "You promised me he would be protected." "And he will be," Kyle said firmly. "I won't let them touch him." "You can't stop the entire media machine," she whispered. "This is going to spread everywhere." Kyle paused, then shook his head slowly. "No, not the way they think." He took her hand, carefully, respectfully. "Let me handle the media, all of it." Andrea's lips parted, disbelief and fear swirling in her eyes. "Kyle, this is your empire, your reputation, your investors, your board, your image. They will not like this. I don't care what they like." His voice grew firmer. "I care about you, and I care about my son. If the cost of protecting him is disappointing a few billionaires, then let them be disappointed." Andrea stared at him. This wasn't the man she remembered from 4 years ago. This wasn't the man who ran from responsibility. This wasn't the man who chose image over intimacy. This was someone else. Someone who had finally grown into his heart. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't messages. It was the doorbell. Andrea froze. Kyle's expression sharpened. "I get it." He strode to the door and opened it. A reporter stood there, camera crew behind him. "Mr. Renshaw, is it true the boy is yours? Can you confirm your relationship with—" The question never finished. Kyle stepped outside, closing the door behind him before Andrea or Leon could see the growing crowd. More reporters, more cameras. Microphones pointed like weapons. His security team hadn't arrived yet. It was just him. The reporter tried again. "Mr. Renshaw, the public deserves to—" "No," Kyle cut him off sharply. "What the public deserves is compassion, respect, and boundaries." Flashes went off. Voices overlapped. The frenzy grew. Kyle raised his voice, not shouting, but commanding. "Listen to me carefully. My son is a child, a minor. You will not photograph him. You will not follow him. You will not harass his mother. If you do, I will shut down every outlet responsible. I have the resources. I have the legal team, and I will not hesitate." Cameras lowered slightly. A reporter stepped forward. "Why hide him for 4 years?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "I wasn't told about him," he said honestly. "But that changes nothing about who he is to me now. He is my son, and I will protect him with my life." Inside the house, Andrea pressed her hands to her mouth as she overheard every word. She felt her heartbeat in her throat. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't calculating. He was defending with everything he had, and it shook her deeply. Security finally arrived, guiding the reporters away as Kyle returned inside, breath unsteady, but eyes fierce. Andrea stared at him. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "I did. Your reputation means nothing," he cut in. "Not compared to my son." Andrea swallowed hard, overwhelmed. Kyle stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And to you," those last words hit her like a soft thunder. She looked down, emotions tangled and heavy. Lian peeked from the hallway, holding his stuffed dinosaur. "Mom? Dad? Why were people outside?" Andrea kneeled and opened her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, ignore them. Come here." He ran into her embrace. Kyle approached gently. "It's okay, buddy. Nobody's going to bother you. I promise." Lian nodded, trusting him completely. Andrea saw it. The subtle bond forming with each hour, each gentle word, each protective gesture. Kyle looked at Andrea again. "Let me help," he whispered. "Let me be part of this, of his life, of your life. Let me show you that I'm not the man I used to be." Andrea inhaled deeply. 4 years of pain. 4 years of independence. 4 years of guarding her heart. And now, this. Maybe she couldn't trust him fully yet. Maybe she shouldn't. But today, he proved something important. He was trying, not with words, but with actions. And actions mattered. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure this out. Together." Kyle's eyes softened with relief and devotion he didn't try to hide. "Together," he echoed. And for a moment, in a quiet home with a sleeping child and fading camera flashes outside, it felt like the beginning of something new, something brave, something beautiful, something worth trying for. The media storm didn't disappear overnight, but thanks to Kyle's swift intervention, it never turned into the wildfire Andrea feared. He deployed his legal team. He called in favors. He shut down rumors before they could spread. And he personally ensured that every photo of Lian was blurred or removed. Andrea couldn't deny it. He protected them with a fierceness she didn't expect and a consistency she didn't know he had. But with protection came presence. Kyle began showing up. Not the way wealthy men sometimes show up with gifts or financial support. He showed up with time, with effort, with love, every day, in small ways. He came early in the morning to walk Lian to preschool, holding his tiny hand as they crossed the street together. Andrea watched from the doorway, heart tugging as she heard her son proudly tell the neighbors, "This is my dad. He's really smart." Kyle would glance back at Andrea with that quiet look. Soft, grateful, careful. She pretended not to notice. He came in the afternoons, helping Lian build Lego towers and teaching him things about circuits, numbers, and storytelling. Sometimes he burned dinner while helping Andrea cook. Sometimes Andrea laughed as he panicked over a pot of pasta boiling too fast. Those moments felt alarmingly normal, comfortable, domestic. A life they almost had. If things had gone differently, Andrea tried to keep emotional distance. But distance is hard when someone shows up gently, consistently, purposefully. One evening, about a week after the media incident, Kyle arrived a little later than usual. Andrea was washing dishes, humming softly while Leon drew shapes at the table. When Kyle knocked, Leon jumped out of his chair. "Dad!" Andrea wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door. But something was different. Kyle looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally worn. Andrea tilted her head slightly. "What's wrong?" He held out a folder. "Investors, board members, a PR team. They all want statements, explanations, control. They're trying to turn my son into a narrative." And I said no. Andrea studied him carefully. "What did they do?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "They asked if I could distance myself publicly until things settle." Andrea's stomach twisted. "And what did you say?" she whispered, bracing herself. Kyle met her eyes directly. "No." The word wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Andrea breathed out slowly. Relief mingled with fear. "That could cost you everything," she said. "I know you could lose investors. I know you could lose your board seat. I know." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "So why refuse?" Kyle swallowed hard, his voice lowering to something raw and honest. "Because I already lost 4 years of his life. I'm not losing another minute. And I'm not losing you again either." Andrea's breath caught. He stepped closer, slowly, respectfully. "I don't care about optics, or headlines, or shareholders who think family makes me weak." His voice softened. "Family doesn't make me weak, Andrea. It makes me whole." Her chest clenched. Her eyes burned. She turned away, trying to gather herself, but Kyle gently touched her arm. "Andrea." She faced him again, her defenses wavering. "You left once, Kyle," she whispered, "when things got difficult. And I had to learn to live without you." He nodded, accepting the truth. "And I will spend every day showing you I'm not that man anymore." Andrea's eyes glistened. "You can't promise that," she said brokenly. "People change under pressure." Kyle stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth of him. "Then let me prove it when pressure hits," he said. "Not with words, with actions." Andrea looked down, shaking her head. "You're asking me to trust you again?" "No," Kyle said gently. "I'm asking you to let me earn it." Her breath trembled. She looked toward the dining table where Leon hummed quietly, coloring another picture. A future that looked nothing like their past flickered in her mind. A family, a second chance, a life reshaped by truth instead of fear. Andrea whispered, barely audible, "I don't know how to let you back in." Kyle's voice softened to a whisper. "Then let me stand outside the door. I won't force it open. I'll wait until you're ready to unlock it." Andrea squeezed her eyes shut. Why did love always feel like both a blessing and a wound? When she opened them, Kyle was still there, steady, present, patient. He wasn't asking for a decision, just a chance. She swallowed hard. "Kyle, I'm scared." "I am too," he said. "But I'm here anyway." The vulnerability in his voice broke something gently inside her walls. She exhaled shakily. "Stay for dinner." Kyle blinked, surprised, softened, grateful. "I'd love to." Andrea turned and walked back toward the kitchen, heart pounding. Kyle followed her in. Her hand shook slightly as she handed him a spoon. "Stir," she said, voice quiet but steady. Kyle accepted it with a smile that held 100 emotions. He stirred the pot. She chopped vegetables. Their movements awkward at first, then gradually synchronized. Lian peeked over from his chair. "Mom? Dad? Are you making dinner together?" Andrea hesitated. Kyle looked at her, waiting. Then she nodded. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "We are." Lian beamed. "Good. I like us together." Andrea and Kyle exchanged a look full of longing, fear, tenderness, and something beginning to bloom again. Something alive, something possible, something neither of them dared to name yet, but both of them felt it, deeply. Dinner that night felt different, not forced, not awkward, but intimate in a way that made Andrea's heart race. As the three of them sat around the small dinner table, Lian happily munching on noodles, Kyle and Andrea stealing soft glances at each other, the room felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Full of warmth, full of possibility, full of the quiet, dangerous beginnings of something healing. After dinner, Kyle insisted on washing the dishes. Andrea dried them. Their shoulders brushed occasionally. Each accidental touch sent a flutter through her chest she tried desperately to ignore. Later, after Lian was tucked into bed, Andrea walked Kyle to the door. The hallway light cast soft shadows across their faces. Kyle paused at the threshold. "Thank you," he said softly. "For tonight," Andrea nodded. "It was nice." He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't rehearsed or polished, just real. "I'll see you tomorrow." A hesitation fluttered across her eyes. Then she nodded. "Tomorrow." He turned and left. Andrea closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a breath she'd been holding all night. She was falling, and it terrified her. The next morning, the world tested that fear. Andrea arrived at preschool with Lian, but the moment she stepped inside, she sensed something wrong. Whispers, sideways glances, parents leaning together as she passed. Her stomach dropped. One woman approached, voice dripping with polite venom. "So, I heard your child's father is a billionaire. How convenient." Andrea's breath caught. She stiffened. "My child's father is a person," she replied calmly. "And I'm asking you to respect our privacy." The woman smirked. "Privacy? Honey, your son is basically trending." Andrea clenched her jaw. "Please move. My son needs to get to class." A man nearby added, "So when's the book deal coming?" You know the world loves a single mom meets billionaire story. That one stung. Before Andrea could respond, a small voice tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, why are they being mean?" Her heart cracked. She knelt down, kissing Lian's forehead. "They're not being mean to you," she said gently. "They're just confused." But the truth was sharper. They were judging, assuming, dehumanizing, exactly what she feared. Lian hugged her tightly before going to class. And that's when she broke. She stepped outside the building, pulled out her phone, and called Kyle. He answered instantly. "Andrea, is everything okay?" Her breath trembled. "No." "Can you come? I'm already on my way." He showed up within minutes, parking slightly crooked in his urgency. He ran toward her, breathless, eyes filled with concern. What happened? Andrea looked up at him, tears she'd held back finally slipping free. They're talking. The parents. The staff. They're treating me like I did something wrong, like I used you. And Leon heard it. Kyle, this is exactly why I stayed away. Kyle's expression sharpened. Anger, regret, and protectiveness swirling at once. Who said something to you? He asked, voice low and dangerous. It doesn't matter, she whispered. This is what comes with your world, with your name. And I don't know if I can expose Leon to that. I don't know if I can expose myself to it. I'm not built for this kind of life. Kyle stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. Andrea, you don't have to live my life. We make our own life, separate from the chaos, separate from the noise. It's not that simple, she whispered, pulling her hands back. People will always talk. They will always assume. They will always judge. Kyle swallowed thickly. And you think I'll let them? You think I'll let anyone treat you like that? Or treat Leon like that? Andrea shook her head, tears streaming now. I don't want to be a scandal, Kyle. I don't want to be a headline. I don't want Leon to grow up with people looking at him like he's an accident, or a secret, or a tool. Kyle reached out again, but she stepped back this time. Andrea, she lifted her trembling hands to her face, pressing them to her forehead. I need time, she whispered. I need to breathe. I need to think. Kyle's chest clenched. He lowered his hands slowly, respecting her space. Okay, he said softly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She looked up at him, vulnerable and torn. I'm scared, Kyle, she confessed. I feel like if I let you in again, I'll lose myself. Kyle stepped closer, slowly, carefully. You won't lose yourself, he whispered. You'll find someone who stands beside you. Not in front, not behind. Beside. Andrea blinked rapidly, trying to stop the tears. Kyle reached out and gently brushed one from her cheek, his touch feather light. Andrea, I'm not asking you to choose a life of attention or pressure. I'm asking you to choose a life where you don't have to carry everything alone. Her breath hitched. Please don't push me, she whispered. I'm not, he said. I'm just here, steady, for you, for him, for us, if you ever want that. Andrea closed her eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. I just need space. Kyle nodded, even though it clearly hurt him. Then I'll give you space, he whispered. But not distance. Andrea swallowed. What does that mean? It means I'll step back, he said softly. But I won't disappear. Her heart clenched painfully at his words. She nodded slowly. Then she turned and walked away. Kyle watched her go, shoulders trembling, determination mixed with heartbreak in each step. He didn't chase her. He didn't beg. He simply let her go gently, trusting that if love was meant to return, it would find its way back when the heart was ready. Andrea didn't sleep that night. She lay awake long after Leon drifted into peaceful dreams, staring at the ceiling as shadows shifted across her room. Her mind spun with everything she'd been trying to ignore. The media, the pressure, the judgment, the risks, the fear of losing control, the fear of losing her heart, and the fear of losing Kyle all over again. She had rebuilt her life alone, piece by piece, quietly, deliberately, letting someone else back in, especially someone who'd broken her before, felt like handing over the blueprint to a home she'd spent years constructing. It terrified her, but there was something else she couldn't ignore. Kyle wasn't the same man who walked away 4 years ago. He was different, present, gentle, patient, protective, no longer just driven, balanced, and the more she tried to push that truth away, the louder it became. The next morning, Andrea walked Leon to school alone. She expected the stares. She expected the whispers. She expected the knot of anxiety in her stomach. But something else happened. When she reached the entrance, the same woman who'd mocked her the day before stepped forward, hesitant, almost embarrassed. "Andrea," the woman said quietly, I wanted to apologize." Andrea stopped, taken aback. "I shouldn't have said what I said," the woman continued. "It wasn't fair. I let the gossip get to my head. It wasn't right." Andrea blinked. An apology that she did not expect. The woman glanced at Leon, who gave a tiny wave. "He's a sweet boy," she added softly, "and he deserves kindness." "So do you." Andrea's heart softened, surprised, relieved. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. The woman smiled awkwardly and stepped back. Andrea exhaled deeply, feeling something inside her begin to ease. Maybe the world wasn't as cruel as she feared. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. That afternoon, after picking up Leon, Andrea found a small package waiting at her door. No signature, no note, just a simple wrapped box. Her pulse quickened. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single hardcover book, a photograph, and a handwritten letter. Andrea's breath caught as she lifted the photo. It was of Kyle and Leon in the garden at the Renshaw estate, mid-laugh, sunlight catching their faces, natural, unposed, real, the kind of picture that captured truth, not headlines. She opened the letter next. "Andrea, I know you asked for space, and I'm giving it to you. But I also wanted you to see something. This picture wasn't taken by the media. My mother took it. She said it was the first time she saw me look truly happy in years. I don't want to intrude or overwhelm you, but I want you to know this. I am here for Leon, every day, in every way you allow, and for you, only in the ways you feel safe with. No pressure, no expectations, just presence, just effort, just honesty. Kyle." Andrea pressed the letter to her chest as a tear slipped out. She could hear his voice in every word, feel his sincerity, his patience, his restraint. The rest of the package held the book, a children's story about a little boy building a bridge across 2 islands so his parents could find one another again. A metaphor so gentle and yet so pointed that Andrea had to sit down. Leon peeked over her shoulder. "What's that, Mom?" Andrea wiped her eyes quickly. "It's a gift," she said softly. "From who?" She hesitated for only a moment. "From your dad." Leon smiled brightly. "Can we read it tonight?" Andrea looked at the book, the letter, the photo, and her heart whispered, "Yes?" But she nodded softly instead. "We can read it tonight." For the next 2 days, Andrea kept a little distance, not because she wanted to push Kyle away, but because she needed to understand her own heart first. But Kyle didn't disappear. He texted her simple messages. "How's Leon's day going? Tell him I'm proud of him. No pressure, just checking in." He didn't demand updates. He didn't ask for more. He simply showed consistency. And consistency was the one thing Andrea had always needed. On the third day, Leon woke up with a fever. It wasn't alarming, but it made him cling to Andrea with a soft whimper she hadn't heard in months. She held him close, stroking his hair. "It's okay, sweetheart. You'll feel better." He nodded weakly, then whispered, "Can Dad come?" Andrea froze. "Are you sure?" she asked. Leon nodded again, leaning into her shoulder. "I want him—" Andrea bit her lip. She didn't want to drag Kyle in unnecessarily. She didn't want him to think she was relying on him for every little thing. But this wasn't about her. It was about a child asking for comfort from a man who had promised to be there every day he was allowed. She sent a text. "Leon is sick. He's asking for you." Kyle responded in 10 seconds. "I'm coming. Be there soon." Andrea's chest tightened, not with fear, with relief. He arrived with medicine, warm soup, and a stuffed animal he'd bought on the way. A small robot with blinking eyes. Andrea opened the door. Kyle's first words weren't for her. "Where is he?" She gestured to the bedroom. He nodded and walked in quietly. Andrea followed. Leanne lay curled under his blanket, cheeks flushed, eyes droopy. Kyle sat beside him, gently brushing hair from his forehead. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "Not feeling good?" Leon shook his head. Kyle kissed his forehead, an instinctive, tender gesture Andrea wasn't prepared for. She felt her throat tighten. Kyle stayed for hours, feeding him soup, reading to him softly, letting him fall asleep against his chest. Andrea watched from the doorway, heart unraveling stitch by stitch. This was fatherhood, not money, not genetics, presence, patience, love. And when Leon finally drifted off, Kyle carried him gently to the bed, tucked him in, and kissed his cheek. Andrea stepped closer. "Thank you," she whispered. Kyle turned toward her slowly. "You never have to thank me for loving my son." Andrea inhaled shakily. Their eyes met. The air between them charged, soft, vulnerable, dangerous. Kyle stepped closer, voice barely above a breath. "Andrea, tell me what you're thinking." She swallowed. She didn't want to say it, didn't want to be weak, didn't want to reopen a wound, but the truth spilled anyway. "I'm thinking," she whispered, "that every time you show up like this, it gets harder to keep my distance." Kyle's breath caught. He stepped even closer, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "And every time you let me in," he whispered back, "I fall a little more in love with you." Andrea's breath trembled. "Kyle, I can't handle heartbreak again." He cupped her cheek gently, not pulling her close, just holding her with reverence. "You won't have to. Not this time." Her lips parted. Her heart pounded. Her body leaned without thinking, just slightly, toward him. And for the first time in 4 years, Andrea wasn't running from the feeling. She was allowing it. She closed her eyes. Kyle's forehead rested against hers. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just closeness. Just honesty. Just the beginning of something returning. Slowly. Gently. Beautifully. Andrea didn't realize she was trembling until Kyle gently brushed his thumb along her cheek. His touch wasn't demanding. It wasn't presumptive. It was steady, patient, almost reverent. He didn't move to kiss her. He didn't close the small distance between them. He didn't force a moment she wasn't ready for. Instead, he whispered, tell me if this is too much. His voice was low, careful, like he was holding fragile glass in his hands. Andrea shook her head just slightly, their foreheads still resting together, breaths mingling softly in the dim room. It's not too much, she whispered. It's overwhelming, but not too much. Kyle exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. Overwhelming can be okay, he murmured, as long as it's honest. Andrea's lips parted, breath warm against his. I don't know how to do this, she confessed. I don't know how to let someone back in. I don't know how to trust without being terrified. Kyle gently lowered his hand from her cheek, letting it settle over her shoulder. Light, grounding, safe. You don't have to know, he said. We can figure it out, together. Andrea closed her eyes, soaking in the warmth of his words. It had been years since someone said together and meant it. Silence fell, soft, emotional, vulnerable. Then Kyle pulled back just a fraction, enough to look her in the eyes. Andrea, he said gently, I want to take care of you, but only if you let me, only if you want it. Her heart tightened. She wasn't used to this version of him, this man who wasn't leading with confidence and ambition, but with humility and gentleness. I'm afraid, she whispered. I know, he replied. So am I. She blinked, surprised. You, he nodded. I'm afraid of messing this up, of losing what little trust you're giving me, of not being enough for you or for him. I'm afraid because this, all of this, matters to me more than anything has in years. Andrea's breath caught. Something inside her shifted, subtle, but undeniable. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't instant, but it was real. She stepped back slightly, needing space to breathe, but not to flee. Kyle didn't follow her. He stayed where he was, hands at his sides, giving her room. Andrea brushed a hand through her hair, trying to calm the swirl of emotions. I'm not ready for more, she said softly. Not yet. Kyle nodded immediately. I'm not asking for more, he said. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to be here. A chance to show you I mean everything I've said. A chance to earn your trust day by day. Andrea studied him. His eyes held no impatience, no frustration, no ego, just sincerity. You're different, she whispered without thinking. Kyle gave a small, aching smile. I had to be. The man I was hurt you, and I live with that. Andrea's throat tightened. Hearing him acknowledge that so openly made something warm ripple inside her. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked gently. For growing. Kyle's breath caught this time. Andrea stepped closer, just a little, enough for him to feel her presence, not enough to slip into dangerous territory. I think we can try, she murmured, slowly, carefully, with boundaries. Kyle's hand moved slightly, like he wanted to take hers but wasn't sure it was allowed. Andrea noticed. She hesitated. Then she reached out first, slipping her hand into his. Kyle froze, surprised. Then his eyes softened with a quiet, aching emotion she hadn't seen since the night they first fell into something real all those years ago. He laced their fingers slowly, like he was handling a delicate memory brought back to life. You have no idea, he whispered, how much this means to me. Andrea looked down at their joined hands. I'm not promising anything, she said. You don't have to, he replied. This is already more than I hoped for. For a moment, they stood quietly in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, their hands joined, their breaths steadying. The air felt charged, but gently, respectfully. Andrea pulled her hand back after a few seconds, cheeks warm. Kyle didn't look disappointed. He looked grateful. "I should go," he said gently. "Get some rest." Andrea nodded. "Thank you for being here." "Always," he replied, without hesitation. He stepped toward the door, paused, and glanced back at her one last time. Andrea felt her heart leap. "Good night, Andrea." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Good night, Kyle." He left with a quiet click of the door. Andrea stood in the hallway long after he was gone, fingers tingling from the warmth of his touch, heart fluttering with a mix of fear and something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. The next morning, Leon woke brighter, fever fading. When Andrea told him his dad had stayed late to take care of him, the boy smiled sleepily. "He loves us," Leon said, matter-of-factly. Andrea blinked. "Why do you say that?" Leon shrugged with innocent certainty. "Because he looks at you the same way you look at me." Andrea's breath trembled. Children see truth adults are too cautious to admit. She hugged him tightly. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. Later that afternoon, Andrea sat alone at the kitchen table, sipping tea while sunlight streamed through the window. Her gaze drifted to the letter Kyle had sent, still sitting on the counter. She read it again. Every word felt honest, grounded, earnest. And as she set the letter down, she realized something. Her fear hadn't disappeared. Her wounds hadn't magically healed. Her trust wasn't fully restored. But for the first time in years, her heart wasn't closed. It was open, just slightly, just enough. And sometimes, that's where love begins again. 2 days later, Andrea found herself pacing the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Kyle was late. Not very late, not irresponsibly late. Just late enough for her heart to start whispering all the old fears she thought she'd buried. He got busy. He forgot. He prioritized work again. She hated those thoughts, hated how easily they resurfaced. But trauma doesn't need permission to return. It just walks back through the door. She tried to steady her breath, tried to remind herself that the man Kyle was now was not the man who walked away 4 years ago. Still, doubt flickered. When Kyle finally knocked, she opened the door quickly, too quickly, and he immediately caught the anxious energy radiating from her. He frowned with concern. "I'm so sorry," he said, stepping inside gently. "Traffic was a mess. There was an accident on the highway." "I should have called." Andrea shook her head, embarrassed by her overreaction. "No, it's okay." Kyle stepped closer. "It's not," he said softly. "You waited. You worried. That matters. And I should have let you know I was delayed." Andrea's breath caught at how quickly he recognized her emotional state. No defensiveness. No excuses. Just understanding. She nodded a little, looking down. "Thank you," she whispered. Kyle smiled faintly. "Can I make it up to you?" he asked. Andrea raised an eyebrow, curious. "How?" Kyle gestured toward the door with a playful tilt of his head. "I want to take you both somewhere." Andrea folded her arms lightly. "Where? You'll see." Andrea hesitated. She didn't want to indulge in something that felt too much like a date. Not yet. But Kyle sensed her hesitation and gently added, "It's not fancy, not overwhelming, just meaningful." Her heart softened a little. "Let me get Leon's shoes," she said quietly. Kyle smiled with warm relief. They drove a few minutes across town until they arrived at a quiet community park, the kind with an old wooden bench, a small pond, and a walkway lined with trees that swayed gently in the late afternoon breeze. Andrea looked at him, surprised. "You brought us here?" Kyle nodded. "This is the first place I ever came when I moved to this city," he said. "Before the investors, before the chaos, before everything." Andrea's eyes softened. "You never told me that." Kyle shrugged lightly. "I didn't tell anyone. Back then, this was the only spot where I could think clearly, where I felt like I could breathe. Even when I was struggling." He paused, glancing at the pond. "I was alone then. I don't want to be alone anymore." Andrea's breath trembled. Leon tugged Kyle's sleeve. "Dad, look, ducks." Kyle grinned. "Let's go see them." Leon pulled him toward the pond, leaving Andrea a step behind, watching the two most important people in her life bond naturally, effortlessly. Kyle crouched beside Leon, pointing out the baby ducklings swimming close to their mother. Andrea watched them with a slow, blooming warmth. This wasn't about romance. This wasn't about dramatic reconciliation. This was about something quieter, something steadier, something real. Family. A family they never got the chance to be, but were slowly becoming. After a while, Leon ran off to climb the small play structure nearby, leaving Andrea and Kyle by the water. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching the ripples move across the pond. "I know you're scared," he said quietly, without looking at her. Andrea's breath stilled. Kyle continued, voice gentle and grounded. "You're scared of losing your independence, your peace, your heart. You're scared that letting me back in will mean losing control." Andrea swallowed hard. "You're not wrong." He turned to face her fully. "You won't lose yourself, Andrea. Not with me. Not this time." She shook her head slightly, voice trembling. "You can't promise that." "You're right," he said. "I can't promise the world won't talk. I can't promise life won't throw storms our way. But I can promise effort. I can promise presence. And I can promise that when things get hard, I don't leave." Andrea blinked, tears threatening. "You left before." Kyle nodded, eyes filled with remorse. "And I regret it every single day. Not because it cost me a relationship, but because it cost me years with my son, years with you, years of a life that could have been." Andrea's chest tightened. "I was scared," he admitted. "I ran because I thought choosing love meant settling down too soon, losing momentum, derailing everything I'd worked for." "And now?" she asked softly. Kyle took a steadying breath. "Now I know that success without someone to share it with feels like a beautiful, fully furnished house with no lights on." Andrea's breath trembled again. He wasn't trying to win her back with grand gestures. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't demanding. He was simply telling the truth. Raw, unfiltered, human. Andrea stared at the water, then at Kyle, then at the little boy who adored them both. And suddenly, The fear didn't feel quite as heavy. It didn't feel like a wall, more like a doorway she wasn't ready to step through, but one she was now willing to look at. Lian ran back over, breathless and excited. "Mom, Dad, I climbed all the way up." Kyle gasped dramatically. "No way. You're basically a superhero now." Lian puffed up proudly. Andrea laughed, heart swelling. Watching them together, something inside her clicked. Fear didn't have to make decisions for her. Not anymore. She reached out and gently brushed Kyle's shoulder. He froze, surprised. She held his gaze. "Thank you," she said softly. "For today." Kyle smiled. Slow, warm, hopeful. "I'd do it again. Every day, if you let me." For the first time, Andrea's smile wasn't guarded. "I might," she whispered. Kyle's breath caught. In that moment, standing beside the pond, with their son laughing in the background, they weren't rebuilding the past. They were building something new, something earned, something steady, something that felt like love, finding its way back home. A few days passed after the park visit. Days filled with small moments that didn't look like much on the surface, but mattered more than Andrea expected. Kyle called each morning, not demanding updates, not prying, just checking in. "How's Lian feeling today? Did he eat breakfast? Do you need anything?" Little things. But consistency is built from little things. And Andrea felt each one gently stitching trust back into the space between them. One evening, while Andrea cooked dinner, Lian sat cross-legged on the floor working on a puzzle. He hummed a song he made up, tapping his little feet to an imaginary beat. Then, out of nowhere, he looked up and said, "Mom, I want Dad to live with us." Andrea froze, her breath stuck in her chest. The spoon in her hand slipped slightly. She turned slowly. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" Lian shrugged innocently, like it was the most logical desire in the world. "Because when Dad is here, everything feels happy, like we're all supposed to be together. Like a circle that closes." Andrea pressed a hand to her heart. "And what do you think Dad would say if he heard that?" Lian smiled. "He'd say yes." Andrea blinked away a tear. Children don't complicate things the way adults do. They see the truth before we're brave enough to say it. She knelt and pulled her son into her arms. "We'll talk about it," she whispered. "Together." Lian nodded against her shoulder, satisfied. Andrea held him tighter. Her heart whispered the same thing. Together. That night, after Lian fell asleep, Andrea sat on her couch and stared at her phone. Her thumb hovered over Kyle's number. She wanted to call. She wanted to talk. She wanted something. But fear still lingered, like a shadow. What if she opened the door too wide? What if history repeated? What if she lost herself again? A knock at the door startled her. She frowned, checking the time. It was late. She opened it. Kyle stood there, breathless, holding a small bag. "I didn't want to bother you," he said softly, "but I picked up some things Lian might like for his school project tomorrow." Andrea stared, surprised by the simple kindness. He held up the bag awkwardly. Pipe cleaners, colored paper, stickers, the works. She blinked. "You came all this way." For that, Kyle shrugged shyly. For him? Andrea's chest warmed. Come in, she whispered. They sat at the kitchen table, preparing small craft supplies for Leanne's project. Glue sticks, construction paper, tiny pom-pom balls, all spread out between them like a snapshot of a life they were slowly learning how to share. Andrea handed Kyle a pair of scissors. You're cutting those crooked, she teased gently. I'm a genius with tech, Kyle said, not craft projects. Andrea laughed, really laughed, and it hit Kyle so unexpectedly that he just stopped and looked at her. She caught his stare and tilted her head. What? Kyle swallowed, voice soft. I forgot how beautiful your laugh is. Andrea inhaled sharply, eyes flickering with emotion. Kyle, don't what? He whispered. Don't make this harder than it already is. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently over hers. I'm not trying to make it harder, he said. I'm trying to be real. With you, with myself, with everything I didn't say back then. Andrea didn't pull her hand away. She just stared at their intertwined fingers, feeling her heart begin to thrum in a dangerous rhythm. Kyle, she whispered. He moved closer, slowly, giving her every chance to stop him. I love you, he said softly. Not because you're the mother of my child, not because you remind me of the past, but because being around you finally makes me feel like a human being again. Not a product, not a headline, not a brand, just a man who wants a second chance. Andrea's breath trembled. I can't do this halfway, she whispered. If I open my heart again, it has to be real, consistent, safe. Kyle lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then that's exactly how I'll love you. Not perfectly, but honestly. Andrea's eyes filled with tears, slow, quiet, unstoppable. Kyle wiped them with his thumb. Tell me what you feel, he said softly. She took a shuddering breath. I feel tired of being afraid. Kyle leaned in closer. And what else? I feel like, she whispered, voice breaking, I never stop loving you, and that terrifies me. Kyle's forehead met hers again, soft, tender, familiar. Then let's be terrified together. Andrea closed her eyes and leaned into him. Their lips met in a slow, gentle kiss, not passionate, not rushed, but full of 4 years of longing, hurt, healing, and rediscovery. A kiss that didn't ask for promises. A kiss that made one. When they pulled apart, Andrea rested her head on his shoulder. Stay, she whispered. Kyle held her tighter. Always. The next morning, Leon woke to find his parents in the kitchen. Laughing, cooking, moving around each other with an ease that felt like home. He climbed onto a chair and grinned. You look like a family now. Andrea and Kyle glanced at each other. Then, without hesitation, they both reached for Leon, pulling him into a warm 3-way hug. Andrea whispered into his hair, We are, sweetheart. Kyle whispered into Andrea's ear, We will be. For real this time. And for once. Andrea didn't doubt it. Not at all. Family. Here's what their journey teaches us. Love isn't lost when time passes. It's lost when effort does. And effort returned can rebuild miracles. A strong woman doesn't hide her wounds. She rises with them. Andrea's strength wasn't loud. It was lived. A changed man isn't one who speaks differently, but one who behaves differently. Kyle didn't win her back with promises. He earned her back with consistency. A child's love can soften even the hardest heart. Leon became the bridge that reunited two souls. And family isn't defined by perfection. It's defined by willingness, by growth, by forgiveness, by choosing each other again and again. Their story didn't just end with a kiss. It ended with possibility, with effort, with hope, with love rebuilt from truth, not fantasy. And sometimes, that's the best kind of love there is. Family. If this story moved you, if it made you smile, cry, or believe in second chances again, do me just one favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new. Comment. Family always wins, and share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Your support helps us touch more hearts and keep stories like this alive. Until next time, family, stay loving, stay hopeful, stay inspired. Love Tales with Mr. Bennett.